Welcome to Maniac Movies, updates Wednesdays and Fridays, and I'm completing my Richard Stanley retrospective with The Color Out of Space.
Then everything just blew up. Big flash, like a pink light. Or actually, I don't even know what color it was. It wasn't like any color I'd ever seen before.
Looks like a meteorite.
Color Out of Space. Richard Stanley's third feature film, and my favorite movie of 2020. Let's talk about it.
It's in the static, it's in the moisture, it's in here, it's out there.
Alright, so The Color Out of Space was a very hotly anticipated movie, and the reason is because its director, Richard Stanley, made a couple of cult films in the 1990s, then basically saw his career destroyed with the disaster that was The Island of Dr. Moreau in 1996. Now, I'm not going to talk about my feelings on that movie. I'm actually going to do a video on that eventually. But I do have videos up on his first two movies, Hardware and Dust Devil. I suggest you check those out. They're both good flicks. But we're here to talk about Color Out of Space. Now, not too many good things came out of 2020, but one of the very few was Richard Stanley came out of retirement and made a really cool, unique horror film. And it was based on H.P. Lovecraft. And we have not gotten a lot of good Lovecraft film adaptations. In fact, we don't really get that many at all outside of like bargain basement stuff. So famously, Stuart Gordon did a few, and they were all very, very good. From Beyond, Reanimator, fantastic movies. Dagon was good. It wasn't as good. Even Color Out of Space was famously filmed once before as a movie called The Curse, starring Will Wheaton. Wheaton. I don't know, everyone does that with his name, which I think is just a way of making fun of the guy because he's so annoying. But Will Wheaton. Yeah, that movie was alright. Lucio Fulci was actually like an effects supervisor on that or something. I haven't seen The Curse in forever. But The Color Out of Space. Now, The Color Out of Space was able to happen because Nicolas Cage, essentially. This production company, XYZ Films, or I think that's what it's called. It's Elijah Wood's production company. They had worked with Cage previously on Mom and Dad and Mandy. And Mandy especially did very, very well. Mandy was kind of an unexpected sleeper hit. And I'm a bad horror fan because I haven't seen Mandy yet. It's right there on Shudder. I could watch it anytime, and I still have not watched that movie. But I have seen Mom and Dad, and that was an entertaining little flick. Color Out of Space is way better, though. Color Out of Space is easily the best thing Nicolas Cage has done in 10 years. Probably longer than that. So Cage kind of famously wrecked his career in the mid-2000s, and he's now kind of making a minor resurgence as a bit of a genre figure. And I'm actually looked up his net worth recently, and man, that guy blew through all his money because he's apparently only got about $20 million left. So I guess that's why he does like 8 movies a year. But Color Out of Space is easily one of the best. It's a good return for Richard Stanley, as Stanley himself said. Once he got back to making a movie, it felt like no time had passed, even though over 2 decades had passed since he made a feature. Now, he had done several documentaries and several shorts, and I've seen most of them, and they're usually pretty interesting. I'm not a big documentary guy, but a lot of them came with the special edition of Dust Devil, which is a really great buy if you can find it. But it's not like he just stopped cold, but he did stop making features because apparently after The Island of Dr. Moreau getting fired from a major studio film like that, he couldn't get a job, or at least he couldn't get a job that he wanted. Like he said that he could get I could direct this cheap slasher movie out in Texas, something like stuff that he just didn't want to do. So he took his time and he made Color Out of Space. Now I think Color Out of Space is going to be a cult classic. It already kind of is. It's a unique, fascinating movie with some amazing visuals. It takes the H.P. Lovecraft story, which I love. I think that the Lovecraft stories, Color Out of Space, which is probably in his top 5, I would say. Probably in his top 5 best stories. And it kind of builds a more creature-oriented story around it. The Color Out of Space by Lovecraft really reads to me like it's almost like an eco-horror story. It deals a lot with tainted water. Lovecraft had a very iffy relationship with water. He hated water, and that shows in a lot of his fiction. And it dealt with being poisoned and the ground being poisoned, the food being poisoned, the death of the ecosystem and vegetation. And it had a very creeping dread feel to it that Lovecraft was great at. Reading that story is like seeing the world end in a microcosm. You know, it's this family on a farm, and the farm is struck by a meteor. So, you know, the local celebrity, they try to, look at it, but the stuff is not of this earth, so no one can really make heads or tails of it. Then the vegetation goes bad, and then the water goes bad, and then the family goes bad. That's essentially the whole story. But, the movie did have to expand on that, because, I mean, Lovecraft didn't write long form fiction, so it's only, what, 30, 40 pages? But the thing that Stanley did that I don't necessarily like is that he shrinks the time a lot. This movie takes place over, what, about a week? I would have liked to have seen it drawn out and see the slow dissolution of this family, but that's fine. He also has a very different tone than Lovecraft. Almost no one has really captured H.P. Lovecraft's tone, like the way he wrote. The closest I've really seen is In the Mouth of Madness by John Carpenter, and that's not even a strict Lovecraft adaptation, it's just inspired by. Although H.P. Lovecraft did encourage people to write within his mythos, so I'm sure he wouldn't have minded. And In the Mouth of Madness is an A-plus film. You should absolutely check that out if you haven't, but I think most H.P. Lovecraft fans have already seen that one. So The Color Out of Space is the story about, like I said, a family on this isolated farm that's supposed to be in the United States, even though it clearly isn't. This was shot in Portugal, and it never for a second looks like it's in America. But fine, whatever. So, meteor strikes, and immediately the youngest son begins acting strange, and it just sort of spirals outward from there. You know, younger children often will have weaker immune systems, so it would affect him quickest, hardest, and fastest. And it's a very straightforward story. Like he didn't really change the meat of the story, but he definitely embellished it. This is a much nuttier story than H.P. Lovecraft wrote, and that's partly because of Nicolas Cage. So Nicolas Cage kind of has three modes as an actor. There's bored Nicolas Cage, and that would be like the Nicolas Cage of Knowing or National Treasure. You know, like the dollar bill is trying to tell me something. Like just reading, obviously not that into it. This is a paycheck. Leave me alone. Then there's Nicolas Cage, the legit great actor, and that would be the guy that's in 8mm or Lord of War. You know, like a really solid actor, a legit actor. And then there's Nicolas Cage, the madman. And that's, the Human Meme Factory, the Wicker Man remake, and all that. Just going to 10, really eccentric, really odd. I actually, the craziest Nick Cage has ever been actually was in Deadfall, that thing with Michael Biehn and James Coburn. That is the worst performance you will ever see by an actor who has an Oscar. I guarantee it. But Richard Stanley is apparently a big fan of another Nicolas Cage madman performance in the movie Vampire's Kiss, I think is the name of that thing. I think I saw it once when I was like 4. I actually considered rewatching it, but I know it's not going to be a good movie. And he encouraged Cage to give that kind of performance here, which is a shame because I would have liked to see this movie star Nicolas Cage, the good actor, not Nicolas Cage, the madman. Because it would have given this movie a stronger emotional core, and that's really the thing that I will complain about with this, is that I never really engage with this family on a meaningful level. There's really not a character in this movie that I care that much about outside of the daughter. And she, the movie feels like it can't decide if she's the lead or not, because she will kind of fall in and out of it. But the actress, I believe her name's Madeline Arthur. I looked at her filmography. She's done a lot of like little bit parts here and there. She was apparently on that thing where they tried to turn Snowpiercer into a TV series. I didn't watch that, so I don't even know how big a part she had in it. And she's a lot older than she looks, too. She's well into her 20s. In this movie, she looks 14, which makes it awkward as hell when she's flirting with Ward Phillips. Howard Phillips, Lovecraft, Ward Phillips, yeah. And I thought that was kind of a clever way to handle the big problem with H.P. Lovecraft, that he had opinions that were common to people in the early 1900s that we now know are wrong. Let's just make the Lovecraft avatar black. There, done. We don't have to apologize for it. We don't have to say, well, we disavow the man, but admires. Just shut the hell up. It was the early 1900s. It was a different time. We know better now. And the guy playing Ward Phillips is fine. The character's just not all that interesting. And that's kind of the problem with this movie, is that none of these characters are all that engaging. Cage's character feels like he should be the lead, but Cage is hamming it up so much that you kind of can't connect with him on any meaningful level. Like when he's flipping out over stuff, like the fruit's all bad, he's like, 10 points, blah, blah. Or when he's freaks out in the car and it just turns into a temper tantrum, like like a childish toy broke. Like, keep in mind, this man's in his 50s. I mean, the character, I believe, in Lovecraft's story is written as being 51, I think. I just reread it recently. I think he said he was 51. And Cage is pretty dead on for the age and body type of this character. So Jolie Richardson from Event Horizon and that TV show Nip Tuck is the wife, and she's good in it. I kudos to her honestly for how fearless she goes. I mean, she has to do some weird shit in this movie. Remember that part where she's eating, drinking from the bowl? She's like lapping it up like a dog. Like I was honestly a little surprised the actress was willing to do that. But yeah, and then the two sons are both blah. I felt no connection to either of these characters whatsoever, and especially the kid. I feel like I should have cared, or in the movie should have made me care that this young child, 8, 10, is in a life or death situation. But I really he just doesn't have any personality, and that's like I said, this is a very visual film. But and I will also say that Tommy Chong is actually really good in this movie. I mean, it's an old hippie, so imagine casting Tommy Chong to play an old burnt out hippie. But he's good in it, and it's cool seeing Tommy Chong in a relatively straight role and a relatively serious role. And I will actually say that I did feel for his character, and I wish he was in it more. He's only in what 3, 4 scenes, but that was cool seeing Tommy Chong. The old Cheech and Chong stoner comedies, or younger people might remember him from that '70s show. He was the old burnout that ran the photo hut. But yeah, this is a visual movie, so you kind of just have to accept that. And to that end, it's really impressive. I mean, you figure this movie's budget was probably what about it was probably about one well I can't even guess. Probably about $150 million less than say Wonder Woman 1984, which just came out. And this movie visually, because Wonder Woman 1984 I think had a $160 million budget. I think this movie had somewhere between $5 to $10 million. This movie is visually way better. It shows that it really is a matter of vision and art, and not just having tons of money to throw CGI crap at the wall. The ending of this movie is as visually engaging as anything you'll see in a mega budget superhero movie. It's awesome. It's weird. It's cool. It's unique, and that's what you can say about this movie. Now, the color magenta was chosen to be the color out of space because apparently the magenta doesn't exist on the natural color spectrum or something. I don't know. I read it, but it was a little over my head. I'm not any kind of expert on optics or light or the visible spectrum, but they did consciously choose magenta for a reason, and it works pretty well. It gives this movie a very unique, very garish color scheme that works well for it, and it goes back to Richard Stanley's inspirations and his love for giallo films, which often use very bright neon colors. So that's cool. And yeah, so the movie, like I said, pretty much follows Lovecraft's story. The meteor hits this family's farm where they're raising alpacas, whatever. And the father is kind of thrust into the local celebrity, and he's not necessarily thrilled about it. In the meantime, the daughter is a practicing Wiccan, and that's a little bit of a reference to the book, which kept making mention of the witch trials, which had happened years before. So she's doing all these kind of protection spells. The mother is now working from home. They've kind of retired from city life to this little small country home after the mother had I believe breast cancer, but she's recovered from that. And the father just wanted to kind of do the retired rich guy thing and just go work a giant nice piece of land on a farm and make believe like he's country folk. No clue why he went with alpacas, but it's unique. So. And then they have 3 kids, the teenage daughter, who I don't think they ever say her name. In the book, it was 3 sons, but they gave a daughter. So it seems like she's probably about... She and the son both look like they're somewhere between 16 and 14. And then a young son, it looks like he's about 8 or 10. So the meteor strikes, and, people come out, and the meteor disappears immediately. That's a little bit faster than it happened in the book. In the book, the meteor kept... First off, the meteor never cooled, which really made me think of nuclear materials. It's hot forever. But it would also sort of shrink away into nothingness over time. But that happened almost instantly in the movie. And people are kind of think that Cage's character might be crazy. He's presented in the news as a bit of a, like one of those UFO kooks. They even ask him, so were you drinking? And he's like, well, I had a drink after, but not before. And he's complaining because his hair is all messed up in the news interview that goes on TV. Then the mother has an accident in the kitchen. That part was a little odd. I'm not quite sure why that was in there other than to get the parents out of the house for a little bit. But yeah, she does one of those things that makes you cringe when she cuts two of her fingers the hell off. And Jolie Richardson is probably, I would say she's a little younger than Nicolas Cage, but she looks older, which is odd. I don't know. So, they have to go to the hospital and it leaves the kids alone. In the meantime, our surrogate, and this is very, very common of Lovecraft's fiction, it usually involves a traveler either encountering people that are doing things that he is uncomfortable or unaware of and can't make sense of, or a traveler encountering someone that tells him a story. In Color Out of Space, the book was a traveler for the reservoir they want to build, encountering a man who, the closest this movie comes to introducing this character is Tommy Chong's character, but this character isn't Tommy Chong's character. He was just a friend of the family, but that's about as close as you come. Anyway, he encounters this old man who tells him the story of the strange and wicked times. So Ward Phillips is the surrogate for this character, only he's there seeing it firsthand instead of being told the story. So, this guy, he kind of has an immediate flirtation with the daughter, which again is weird because the daughter doesn't seem like she's legal, and this guy is clearly well into his 20s, and of course he's wearing a Miskatonic University t-shirt because we gotta throw that reference in. Dagon did that too with the main character of that, the Stuart Gordon adaptation of The Shadow Over Innsmouth. And, Ward Phillips, he has this little bit of flirtation with the daughter, and the daughter has a copy of the Necronomicon, of course, but it's the cheap paperback version that you can get at any bookstore instead of, like, the real, quote-unquote real within the context of Lovecraft's writing by Abdul al-Azhar, I think. It's not an actual work, but in Lovecraft's fiction, it was. Then they released this cheapo paperback of it that's in any bookstore. I actually read most of it. And she's got a copy of that, and she's doing protection spells from that. And I won't jump too much ahead. So anyway, the family immediately starts experiencing weird things, especially after the parents leave. And, like I said, Cage is hamming it up. Like in the scene where he's driving the wife back from the hospital, he's randomly just singing, like, I get that you would say in the context of the movie that he's trying to cheer up his wife, but then also later on when he gets mad at his kids because they finally get back and the kids are all freaked out because weird stuff's been happening around the farm. The little boy says he hears voices inside the well, and the well also figured very heavily into the short story. They lost time. They're feeling sick to their stomachs. The water's gone bad and is making them ill. They get the weird phone call, which it references time distortion. That time is kind of not linear anymore. This is early, so it's not happening as strongly. The color in the book, it makes it a little bit more clear that the color is, as a living entity, is feeding off the family. It's like eating their soul essentially. In the movie, you kind of get that, but not as clearly. But it is growing stronger throughout the movie, and that's why. It's because it's eating the family's soul. And that's why the family kind of becomes one with the color. Which that was kind of a cool way, and a lot of people are kind of arguing about what that means, but I'll get to that later. Anyway, when the parents get back, Nicolas Cage starts doing this thing that I didn't like, and he has a voice that he uses to imitate his father in this movie. And the picture of his father is a picture of an actual friend of H.P. Lovecraft, the guy that created not Conan. It was either the creator of Conan the Barbarian or Doc Savage. I don't remember which. But he does this voice to imitate his father, and it's a very snide, irritated voice. You're never going to be an artist. I had never met a person that talked like that. And the fact that Cage starts doing that more and more as the movie goes on, apparently unintentionally imitating his father, like I said, it undermines the tension of the movie when Cage is doing these weird Nick Cagey meme things. And again, that's clearly what Stanley wanted. I just don't think it was the right decision to make, but whatever. I didn't make the movie. So, Cage gets the thing on attached to his hand. That part was nasty. I think it looked like a jellyfish, and as someone who's been stung by a jellyfish, that sucks. So he gets that thing on his hand, and that starts spreading and looking like it looks like the guy in Thinner, the one who was Lizard in the Stephen King movie Thinner. That anyway, his skin starts getting all dry and reptilian looking, and he keeps getting more and more feeble. Ward Phillips is running around trying to figure out what's going on. He keeps telling everybody don't drink the water, but obviously it's way too late. Tommy Chong is kind of clued into it because it's implied that he's an old hippie. He's very in touch with nature, like to the extent where he can kind of feel it. And that is a great scene where his cat, G-Spot, pussycat, cat's name, G-Spot. He says, where he says, I haven't seen my cat in a while. And Ward Phillips says, well, I'll keep an eye out. He says, well, she may recognize you, but I don't know if you'll recognize her because he knows that this is already changing things. And later we see that cat as a gnarly monster. Then the alpacas go monster, and this is like straight out of John Carpenter's The Thing, where the alpacas are all fused together and freaked out. But yeah, and then it hits the mother and the son. So, I think most people who are watching this have seen this, but I will say heavy spoilers from here on out. So the color hits the mother and the son and fuses them together. Now that did not happen in the book, but it fuses them together and they kind of drag them upstairs. And it's a gnarly image. It's great imagery. The creature that the mom and son become is a fantastic monster. It might be the monster of 2020. So they drag him up there. Like I said, seeing this child in that much pain, because it is clearly painful, does have an impact. So they're a monster. The Nicolas Cage basically just falls apart at this point, and the two teenagers are left trying to figure out what to do and how to get out of here. So, Ward Phillips becomes aware of this and manages to get the local sheriff, Pierce. Pierce is the name taken from the book, and that the sheriff is actually played by one of the movie's producers, to come back. But they're way too late. By now everything's fucked. There you go. And the daughter kind of flips out and starts cutting herself. She covers herself in all these runes, and the one on her forehead specifically is, I believe, a positive energy marking, but they're all real. And this movie's IMDb trivia section is long and full, and if you're a real big fan of this movie, I suggest going there because you can learn a whole lot about it. So yeah, it builds to the end where the color essentially envelops the entire farm, leaving the gray scorched earth behind. So all that's really in line with what it was. So in the book, it was made much more clear that the color is tethered to the well, and that somehow it's not really able. It's maybe slowly expanding, but it can't really reach beyond the well, and that makes a little bit more sense than in the movie. But the teenage boy, the bit where he climbs in the well and puts on goggles, I thought was funny because Richard Stanley clearly has a weird fascination with goggles. Goggles work heavily into both hardware and Dust Devil as well, where main characters wear these really like weird steampunk goggles. So it gets the kid, and then the daughter kind of is enveloped last. Then the scene when the father gets shot was a good scene because he's trying to shoot at the well, but the cop thinks he's going to shoot at his kid. That was a good scene, and honestly, I think that should have been the last we saw of Nicolas Cage, because I didn't really understand why Cage comes back as a zombie and attacks Ward Phillips. That I could have done without that, honestly, because that didn't really gel with anything. It certainly wasn't from the book. I would have liked to have seen what happened in the book, where the bodies kind of crumble away into dust. I thought that was a really disturbing idea, and that's not what we get here. Although the way Tommy Chong's head kind of collapses into itself was cool. And then the daughter's final scene where she kind of willingly gives into the color because she's lost everything at this point is a great moment. And that actress, Madeline Arthur, I hope I'm getting her name right, does a great job in this movie, and I'd like to see her in more stuff. And then it's up to Ward Phillips to survive and kind of tell the story and what happened. And we get to see the gray earth, and then the water covers it, and we have the stuff that's the opening monologue and the closing monologue are more or less verbatim from the book, where he says, "I will never drink the water from here," and all that. It was cool, and we get to see that the colors clearly still has an impact on this area. We see the little flying critters. Also, the trees coming to life was taken from the book. They weren't quite as aggressive, but these are like the trees from the Evil Dead without the sex drive. But the trees were alive, and the vegetation was coming to life. The wildlife was malformed. All that is taken from the book. So this is a pretty faithful adaptation. Like I said, I wish it had had a little bit less comedy in it, and but aside from that, I did really, really like this movie. And in 2020, a year where there were not a lot of good movies getting released, this was a great movie, and a great return to form for Richard Stanley. He has said that he hopes to do a trilogy of Lovecraft adaptations, this being the first, and he wants to do the Dunwich Horror next. The Dunwich Horror is a great story. I would really be curious to see what he did with that. I kind of feel, and I know we've lost Stuart Gordon. He died last year, I think. I would have liked to have seen Stuart Gordon adapt the Dunwich Horror, but Richard Stanley's such a visual filmmaker, and that's such an intimate story. I feel like Stanley would have been better suited to do one of what, like maybe Beyond the Wall of Sleep or one of Lovecraft's bigger stories. But I'll watch it, assuming it gets made, because it doesn't have any official announcement for production yet. But let's hope it gets made, and we'll get another really good horror movie out of Richard Stanley. He's done 3 flicks. They were all A-level movies. Now, I would rank them Hardware is the best, Color Out of Space second best, Dust Devils the weakest, but Dust Devil's still very good. So yeah, let's hope we get to see that movie.